For the first time on the African continent, the CEOs of several foreign mining companies were arrested on the same day and at the same time. The man behind this unprecedented move is Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso. So, how did the heads of some of the world's most influential mining firms end up in handcuffs in an African nation? And how did a system of exploitation running for half a century suddenly come to a halt? Here is the inside story of this historic moment. Everything began at 6:00 a.m. on March 15th in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Special forces moved simultaneously to detain 7 CEOs of major mining corporations who were staying in upscale hotels. Among those arrested were Victor Petro, CEO of Goldmax Corporation, one of the leading gold producers globally, Jean-Claude Dubois, head of Canadian Western Gold Mining, and Michael Thompson, executive at Australian Pacific Resources. This was no random operation. Traoré had been quietly laying the groundwork for several months. First, he conducted a thorough review of the mining company's financial records. He then worked with international legal experts to compile criminal case files. What they uncovered was staggering. Over the past 50 years, gold worth around $500 billion had been extracted from Burkina Faso. Yet only $10 billion of that ever reached the national treasury. Traoré's team worked covertly for 6 months. Informants were embedded at mining sites. Drones captured aerial images. Satellite data was analyzed. They determined actual production levels. The findings were alarming. Some companies were reporting just 1/10 of their real output. As Traoré explained, gold taken from our land and mined by our people is filling European vaults while our citizens go hungry. This ends now. Either you return what you took or spend the rest of your life behind bars. The arrests were swift. Victor Petro tried to summon his private security team, but the special forces had already secured the hotel. He was taken into custody in his pajamas and transported directly to a high-security prison. Jean-Claude Dubois was preparing to flee. His private jet was already waiting at the airport, but Traoré had anticipated this. The country's airspace was shut down and borders were sealed. Dubois was intercepted en route to the airport. Michael Thompson was caught in a hotel meeting room. He was in the process of transferring the company's assets out of Burkina Faso. His computer files seized during the arrest became key evidence in court. Traoré had planned the operation with extreme precision. All companies were ordered to submit their 10-year financial records, which were then reviewed by financial crime experts. The corruption that surfaced was extensive. For example, in 2019, Goldmax Corporation extracted $500 million, 0 cents, of gold from the Taparco mine, but declared and paid taxes on only $5 million, 0 cents. They reported extracting just 1 ton per day, when the actual figure was 10 tons. Western Gold Mining employed a different tactic. The firm created false invoices undervaluing the gold. Gold priced at $60,000, 0 cents per kilogram was listed as sold for just $10,000, 0 cents. The remaining profits were funneled to offshore accounts. The Pacific Resources used yet another approach. They manipulated employee salaries to dodge taxes. On paper, worker wages were listed at 10 times the actual amount. This allowed for inflated tax deductions while the difference was pocketed by the company. Traoré examined all their documentation meticulously and archived each piece as evidence. But perhaps the most explosive revelations were hidden in secret agreements between the companies and former government officials. These confidential deals showed that corporations had been paying millions in bribes annually. For example, in 2015, then Energy Minister Mark Kabor accepted $50 million, 0 cents, in bribes from Goldmax Corporation. In exchange, the company's tax rate was reduced dramatically, from 30% down to just 3%. This deal was costing the nation $2 billion, 0 cents annually. Western Gold Mining took things even further. In 2017, they paid $100 million, 0 cents to Francois Kabor, brother of then-President Roch Kabor. In return, the company received 3 additional gold mining licenses. These mines were located on agricultural lands belonging to local villagers. As a result, around 50,000 people were forcibly removed from their homes. After gathering all relevant documentation, Traoré took action. His first step was to apply to the International Criminal Court. He successfully demonstrated that several mining companies had committed crimes against humanity. The court accepted charges including forced displacement, use of child labor, and environmental damage. Then Traoré made a decisive move. He froze the bank accounts of all mining companies and seized their assets within Burkina Faso. The gold reserves in these mines, valued at 100 billion, were brought under national control. They now belong to the people. The arrest sent shockwaves worldwide. Western media labeled Traoré a dictator. The European Union held an emergency meeting and the United States issued threats. Still, Traoré stood firm. "We are upholding the law," he said. "For 5 decades, these companies broke our laws, evaded taxes, and exploited our people. Justice is finally being delivered. We will not be intimidated." The public strongly supported Traoré. In the capital, Ouagadougou, hundreds of thousands rallied. Banners read, "Our gold belongs to us." Villagers from mining areas felt renewed hope. Amadou Sawadogo, a 65-year-old mine worker, spoke through tears for the first time. "I've worked in these mines for 40 years. Europe became wealthy from the gold we extracted, but my own children couldn't go to school. At last, we are seeing justice." Meanwhile, the detained CEOs faced harsh conditions in Burkina Faso's prisons, a sharp contrast to their former luxurious lifestyles. On the first day, Victor Petrov began a hunger strike, but Traoré responded calmly, "Our mine workers go hungry every day. It may be time you experience the same." Jean-Claude Dubois offered a $1 billion 0 cents bail through his lawyers. Traoré refused, laughing. "What is $1 billion 0 cents compared to the $500 billion 0 cents you stole? Besides, that money belongs to us." Michael Thompson attempted to fake a heart attack. However, doctors sent by Traoré found no medical issues. His false claim later became part of the evidence used against him. Other arrested executives included Robert McKenzie from Continental Gold, James Harrison from African Minerals, Peter Williams of Global Mining Co-op, and David Anderson from Summit Resources. Each faced severe accusations. McKenzie was charged with forced displacement of villagers. Harrison was linked to employing child labor. Williams was held responsible for environmental damage. Anderson was accused of working with armed groups. With global attention fixed on Burkina Faso, the trial began. Traoré had established a special court comprising 3 African, 2 Asian, and 2 Latin American judges. The court's neutral and balanced structure drew international attention. At the first hearing, the prosecutor read out each charge. Every CEO had a separate case file. Goldmax Corporation CEO Petrov faced 234 charges, ranging from tax evasion and bribery to environmental harm and forced displacement. Western Gold Mining CEO Dubois was indicted on 189 counts. The most serious among them was the use of child labor. Evidence showed that 12-year-old children worked underground for 16 hours a day, many of whom later died from lung diseases. Pacific Resources executive Thompson was charged with polluting water sources using cyanide. This contamination affected 3 rivers, and cancer rates increased tenfold across 17 villages. Over 2,000 people reportedly died as a result. The voices of the victims were finally being heard. The courtroom was filled with heart-wrenching testimonies. Musa Uruhugo, who started working in the mines at just 8 years old and is now a 23-year-old lung patient, spoke through tears. "They stole my childhood. They took my health. They've ruined my life." 70-year-old Mariam Cow, whose village was forcibly removed, added, "Our ancestors were buried on that land. It was our home. They destroyed everything for gold. We were given just $100, 0 cents, as compensation, while the gold they took is worth billions." Throughout the trial, Traoré remained composed yet resolute. He attended court daily to observe the proceedings. Speaking to the media, he said, "This isn't just Burkina Faso's fight. It's Africa's fight. If we succeed, other nations will find courage." His actions did spark a ripple effect. In Mali, Amy Goa began probing foreign mining companies. In Guinea, Madi Doya followed suit. In Niger, Abdulrahman Chiani canceled mining agreements. Western companies began to panic. Stock values plummeted. Goldmax corporations lost 70% of their value. Western gold mining operations neared collapse. Pacific Resources had to shut down all activities in Africa. Emergency meetings were held across Europe. French President Macron warned Traoré, "You'll face consequences for this. You cannot interfere with our investors." Troy replied calmly. Call them colonizers, not investors. We welcome genuine investment, but we won't tolerate exploitation. U.S. President Biden threatened sanctions, saying aid to Burkina Faso would be cut off. Troy responded with a smile. The $100 million, the 0 cents you send annually, will earn $10 billion, 0 cents a year from our own gold mines. Give your aid to the puppet regimes instead. Meanwhile, damning evidence surfaced in court. Company emails and internal files were made public. Goldmax Corporation executives had referred to the people of Burkina Faso as stupid natives in internal messages, boasting. Worse still, Western gold mining referred to children as cheap labor. Instead of paying one adult $100, 0 cents, we pay 10 kids $10, 0 cents each, and they never complain, CEO Jean-Claude Dubois wrote. Pacific Resources detailed plans to dump toxic cyanide waste into rivers. No one will notice. These people don't live long anyway. If they die from cancer, they can't blame us, said one report. Continental Gold's Robert McKenzie called the forced displacement of villagers a necessary sacrifice. African Minerals Harrison considered deaths in mines as part of the acceptable risk. Global Mining Corp's Williams labeled ecological destruction as nature renewing itself. As these documents were read, Troy's hands trembled, but he kept his poise. This is what they think of us, but their time is up. Justice will be done, he said. In the 6th month of the trial, the verdict was delivered. Victor Petrov was sentenced to 50 years in prison and fined $10 billion, 0 cents. Jean-Claude Dubois received 45 years and an $8 billion, 0 cents fine. Michael Thompson was sentenced to life for environmental crimes. Robert McKenzie was given 40 years for the forced relocation of communities. James Harrison was handed a 55-year prison sentence for employing child labor. Peter Williams received 60 years for causing environmental devastation and mass fatalities. David Anderson was sentenced to life for funding armed groups. An important aspect of the court ruling was the complete confiscation of each CEO's assets. This included luxury yachts, villas, private jets, and valuable art collections. Proceeds from the sale of these possessions were to be distributed among the families of the victims. Following the verdict, Troy delivered a landmark speech. Today, we didn't just prosecute 7 CEOs, he said. We held a 500-year colonial system accountable, and we prevailed. A new era begins in Africa, where the rightful owners of our resources, our people, will finally prosper. But Troy didn't stop there. He nationalized all mining company assets and founded the Burkina Faso National Mining Company. From that point forward, every mine operated under government control. 70% of mining profits were allocated to healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Immediate results followed. Hospitals and schools began to emerge across mining communities. Worker wages saw a 10-fold increase. Child labor was entirely outlawed, and modern safety standards were introduced in mining operations. The public hailed Troy as a national hero. Songs echoed in the streets, "Troy reclaimed our gold," and "Troy belongs to the people." Festivals sprang up across villages. For the first time in generations, people felt hopeful about the future. Despite efforts by Western media to depict Troy as a dictator, the facts spoke for themselves. Burkina Faso's economy was growing at a remarkable pace. Unemployment rates dropped and poverty levels declined sharply. The country witnessed sweeping progress in both education and healthcare. The numbers were striking. In the year following the nationalization of mining revenues, the country's national income surged by 300%. The government built 500 new schools, 200 hospitals, and paved 5,000 kilometers of road. Electricity reached 2,000 previously unpowered villages, and clean water was supplied to 3 million people who had lacked access. Working conditions in mines improved dramatically. The minimum wage rose from $50, 0 cents to $500, 0 cents. All employees received health insurance, and workplace safety standards were upgraded to European levels. Fatal accidents in the mines dropped to 0. Education saw a transformative shift as well. Technical universities were set up in each mining area. Young citizens no longer needed to leave the country to become mining engineers, geologists, or chemists. Over 10,000 students were enrolled in these institutions, receiving quality education and contributing to a self-sustaining future. Scholarships were introduced, and other African nations followed suit. In a historic shift, 5 mining CEOs were arrested in Mali. In Guinea, bauxite companies were nationalized and Niger brought its uranium mines under state control. Africa had begun to awaken. In a powerful speech, Traoré stated, "We are not enemies of anyone. Our doors remain open to those who wish to engage in fair trade. The era of exploitation is over. Africa's resources rightfully belong to its people. It's that straightforward." As the detained CEOs sat in prison, their companies started to collapse. Goldmax Corporation completely went under, Western Gold Mining was acquired by a smaller firm, and Pacific Resources was dismantled and sold off in parts. Traoré's actions marked a turning point in history. For the first time, an African leader firmly resisted Western corporate control and succeeded. From that point forward, nothing would remain the same. The people of Burkina Faso began to see the real benefits of their nation's wealth. Gold revenues were redirected to build schools, hospitals, and roads. Children were learning in classrooms instead of working in mines. Workers earned fair wages and could live with dignity. Traoré's resistance became a symbol for the oppressed worldwide. Similar movements emerged across Latin America and Asia. People everywhere began reclaiming control over their own natural wealth, and Traoré's vision was validated. Justice had found its voice. Eventually, the system of exploitation collapsed. Africa had risen. No one could plunder its resources any longer because of leaders like Traoré and because the people had awakened. Everything had changed. But this story doesn't end here. Traoré's struggle continues. With each passing day, he takes new steps toward liberation. Every effort brings Africa closer to true freedom, where its resources serve its own people, and that day isn't far off. Traoré showed the path. The future now depends on brave leaders and aware citizens. This is not merely Traoré's story. It's the story of a continent's awakening, a story of resistance against exploitation, a story where justice triumphs. And it's only the beginning.